Hello, I'm Ollie and this is Criminolly, where I talk about crime, pulp, horror, that kind of thing. Today I want to talk about the elephant in the room when it comes to trash, a type of trash book which does not meet my definition of trash. So this is something that's been bothering me for a while, and I'm amazed that nobody's called me out. Nobody's called me out on it, because I've talked a number of times in these Sunday Bollocks videos about what my definition of a trashy book is. And my definition of a trashy book basically is that it's a book that where the publisher sees a demand in the market for a certain type of book, and they quickly push stuff out to fill that demand, and all they're caring about really is filling that immediate demand. They're not worried about long-term literary value. They're not even necessarily worried about long-term sales. There's just a demand there, and they do whatever they can to fulfill that demand quickly. So this book is a great example of my definition of trash. So this is Lone Star, number 142, Lone Star and the Deadly Vixens. So this was published by Jove. It came out in 1994, and at this point, Jove knew that they were onto a winner with originally the Long Arm books and then the Lone Star books. They were published under the name of Wesley Ellis, but in fact, Jove got whoever they could to write these books, so they could churn out as many of them as possible because people were buying them. So this is a saucy western with a simple plot. It's 178 pages, so they will have had kind of a word account that their authors tried to or were told to adhere to. So this for me is very much fits my definition of trash. And I'll say it again. I do try and say this in every video, but a lot of people struggle with the term trash. I do not mean trash disrespectfully. I love trashy books. And this is definitely one. Okay, so I've talked, as I say, a number of times about what my definition of trash is, and this, definitely fits my definition of trash. Now, the elephant in the room is that if you say to somebody, so if I was to say to you, picture a trashy book in your head, and forget that I've just showed you this one and said that it's a trashy book. Picture a trashy book in your head. I bet that most of you are picturing a book like this. So this is, I think, in the public mind, this is a trashy book. The big authors, and I will I'll seamlessly insert some B-roll footage here of me searching up the term trashy books on Google to show you that if you do a Google image search for trashy books, what you get is lots of books like this. Yeah. So books like, so this is Answer Prayers by Danielle Steele. I've got The Stud by Jackie Collins. I've got Dark Angel by Virginia Andrews, which I've just finished the other day. And what else have I got? I've got Savages by Shirley Conran. Okay. So this is, I think, when people say they want to read a trashy book, this is the kind of book that they mean. Okay. So what have these books got in common? Well, they've got two things in common, I think. So the first thing is they're all written by women. And so obviously, this is a difficult one because V.C. Andrews, after she died, the publishers hired Andrew Needleman, who clearly is a bloke, to write the V.C. Andrews books. But this one was published when she was still alive. So all of these books are written by women. And I would argue that all of these books are aimed at a female market as well. And I think that's what most people mean when they say a trashy book. They mean a light, maybe slightly explicit form of entertaining popular novel that's by women for women. Let's raise here the spectre of 50 Shades of Grey. So 50 Shades of Grey, I think, is another book that people would think of when they thought of a trashy book. That was a huge book. We shouldn't underestimate the importance of that book, because so many people read that book who wouldn't have picked up a book otherwise. And that's a wonderful thing. So no matter what you think about the literary merits or otherwise of 50 Shades of Grey, I've read it, I thought it was okay, I don't think it was great. No matter what you think about the literary merits of it, the fact that it encouraged people to read who wouldn't have been reading otherwise, I think is wonderful and should be celebrated. So what does this tell us about my definition of trash and the public definition of trash and publishers' definition of trash? Because these books, and I'll tell you what, something that's very interesting about these books, all of these books are still in print. So I've talked before about trashy books being very much of the moment. So a lot of the New English Library books that I've talked about on the channel that are about like skinhead culture and things like that were only published for a few years and are now out of print. Whereas all of these books are still in print. You know, this is an older edition of Dark Angel, but you can definitely still buy a new edition of Dark Angel. Same with The Stud, same with Danielle Steele, same with Savages. There's a 40th anniversary edition of Savages that came out quite recently. So these are all still selling. These are all still popular books. Popular enough that publishers, continue to publish them in physical copies, not just Kindle copies. And I've been aware, as I say, for a while that this was a gap in my definition of trash, and I had been completely unable to reconcile it with my definition of trash because these books are very different from the kind of books that I normally talk about when I'm talking about trashy books, and yet they are arguably the most important kind of trashy book because these are the books people think of as trashy books. So why do we call these books trash when they don't meet the same criteria of being extremely ephemeral that something like Lone Star does? And I think the reason is really simple, and my thinking in this was clarified recently by a subscriber, and apologies because I don't know I know what your email address is, but I don't know what your your YouTube handle is, but someone sent me a link to an article online that was a celebration of the book Valley of the Dolls by Jacqueline Suzanne, which clearly is a trash classic, and the point that the article was making is that trashy books are, as I've said, books by women for women, that women are taught that they shouldn't enjoy. They are books about the female experience which get classed as trash because there's something to, what is still quite a male-dominated publishing industry. There is something challenging about the idea that women could have, and a lot of these books, you think about something like Valley of the Dolls, that was like a breakout book. So that was, a book that wasn't from an established author, which became absolutely huge. And exactly the same thing is true of 50 Shades of Grey. Yeah. So no one had heard of E.L. James before 50 Shades of Grey, and that book was, a phenomena for the publishing industry. So it's disruptive in a sense. Now, clearly, the publishers don't mind that kind of disruption because they make a hell of a lot of money out of it. But it was still disruptive. It was something completely outside of the norm for publishing, especially as 50 Shades of Grey was originally self-published. So I think publishers find books like 50 Shades of Grey and Valley of the Dolls, I think they find them a bit threatening because they do not fit the normal, they don't fit their normal plans of what people should be reading and what should be successful, and they are difficult to replicate. So books that have a word of mouth success like that are very difficult for publishers to come up with, other versions of. So they try to, but I think, things like NetGalley and, sending books to people like me who will talk about them on social media. But you can't, you cannot manufacture the word of mouth buzz that something like 50 Shades of Grey had. And I think publishers probably find that a bit challenging because it's not something they can control, and they can't build their sales plans for the next 2 years around something that's going to come completely out of left field. So those books tend to get deemed as trashy, and I think readers are encouraged to think of those books as trashy and to think of them as books that are guilty pleasures, that you shouldn't feel good about reading, because they don't fit into the norms of what publishers want us to read, and dare I use the C word again, what critics want us to read. Critics also are challenged by books like 50 Shades of Grey, which many people would say is not a good book in terms of, objectively it is not a good book. And I think, having read it, I think I'd probably agree with that. But that, if the vast majority of people are reading a book which is, which doesn't fit in with the plans of the publishers and the rules of what is and isn't a good book that critics lay down, then the whole the whole thing gets challenged, doesn't it? And publishers lose a bit of their power, and critics lose a bit of their power. One of the books I read this week, which was a pretty terrible book to be honest with you, was this book published under the name Katie Price, but actually written by a ghostwriter, which I keep on forgetting the name of. I think it's called Make My Wish Come True. Now, I did a bit of reading up on Katie Price, and when Katie Price's first novel came out, so Katie Price is an English model who does all sorts of different things to make money. Basically, one of the things she does is publish these trashy novels under her, under her name, but goes through them. When her first novel came out, such was the popularity of it that it outsold the entire Booker shortlist for that year. So her one trashy book outsold all of the books on the Booker shortlist that year, combined. And that's got to be a bit challenging for people, hasn't it? For people who make their living by pushing readers to want to read a certain kind of book, that when a book comes completely out of left field, and maybe the Katie Price book didn't come completely out of left field, but a book which has, which is perceived as having no real literary merit, which is ghostwritten, so not even written by the person whose name is on the cover, and it sells that well, that's a bit of a threat. And I think it's natural, maybe not natural, maybe natural's too strong a word. I think it's not surprising that publishers and critics and the literary establishment want people to think of that kind of book as trashy. Now, loads of people love that book. And I said in my weekly wrap-up that the Katie Price book I read had an unusually high average score on Goodreads. It was like 4.25. And I find that, anything over 4 is quite unusual. Most books, when you average things out, have a rating of less than 4. So clearly, the people who read that book really, really like it, and therefore, by anybody's definition, it has some kind of value. It may not have literary value. It may not be a classic which is studied in 100 years' time, but it has value to the people who read it, which is important. So I think that I've missed something in my definition of trash, and I still can't figure out how to weave these into my definition of trash seamlessly. And to be honest with you, I don't think I can. If anyone's got any ideas, let me know in the comments, because these are not, these are not books that only exist for a short amount of time, like the Lone Star books. These are books that persist. These are books that have, a very dedicated readership who absolutely love them, who get real value out of them, and yet publishers want us to think of these books as trashy, and they want us to feel guilty for reading these kind of books. They want us to read, they want us to buy them clearly, but they don't want us to think that these books are good books. One of the observations that Steve Donoghue made in a video of his I watched this morning, which I thought was fantastic, is the better the cover, the more likely a book is to be trashy. And I think, I think this cover, I was thinking this when I picked up Savages the other day. This is such a good cover. It's an iconic cover. And it turns out the person who did the cover photograph, Tony McGee, this is a complete aside, but he's a really well-known portrait photographer. He's photographed loads of really famous people like Bowie and people like that. I think this is an amazingly good cover. I did start reading the book and I left it, so draw your own conclusions about whether Steve's assessment that a great cover means the book is less likely to be good is true. But publishers clearly spend a lot of money getting great covers on these books, so people will buy them. So I'm not saying that publishers don't want us to read these books, but I think there's a tension there between the books that publishers know make money and the books that publishers really want us to be reading. So yeah, do let me know what you think in the comments. As usual with these Sunday Bollocks videos, I haven't got all the answers, or indeed any of the answers. I'm merely posing the question. So interested to continue that discussion in the comments. It just occurred to me that the other thing all of these books have in common is that the font on them is gold. And I think there's something else there about this kind of trashy book. And this is something that was called out in that in the article I referred to as well, actually, that they are often about wealth. So wealth is often a big part of this kind of very popular trashy fiction. And certainly that's the case for 50 Shades of Grey, isn't it? Which is, after all, about a billionaire. So yeah, another element to throw into the mixing pot there. So yeah, do let me know what you think. And as always, thank you very much for watching. Hope you're safe and well. Hope you're reading good stuff. Hope you're enjoying GarbAugust. And I'll speak to you again very soon. Cheerio.